So recycling is a really great thing to do to reduce waste, but some things in your garbage can't be recycled. I don't recommend putting a banana peel or an apple core or a piece of moldy bread in your recycling bin, but nature recycles too. So here at the recycling center, we have some very friendly decomposers that we keep around to eat scraps from our lunchroom. These are Composting Red Worms, and as you see, they're in a special house. They're not native to Minnesota. They don't usually live around here. They wouldn't do very well in the winter. So we keep them in a house and it keeps them contained. Just like a worm you might find in your garden, they like it wet, damp, and above freezing ideally. So we keep them in the house so they don't dry out. And I will look. So there will be food scraps in here. And we're just gonna take a peek in our worm house. So in the top layer, there's a bunch of shredded newspaper, which is called bedding. That's gonna keep the worms covered, keep them damp, and it's gonna prevent any pests from getting at the food scraps that are in here. So worms like to eat anything that's mushy. And so they're a decomposer, and other decomposers like bacteria or insects help break down the food to make it really mushy, because a worm has no teeth. It can't take a bite out of that apple core. Let's take a look. So if I'm taking up some of their covering here, I see some moldy orange peels, a leftover banana peel, nice and mushy, which the worms will really like. Let's find a spot that has more worms. Here we go. So the worms are recycling with their bodies, and what's left over after they digest the food scraps or any organic matter is called castings. It's a great fertilizer, and that's what's left over after all this stuff is recycled, like nature recycles. So there's some food scraps up here. Let's take a look in a different layer of the worm house. I think these worms need another snack. I'll have to feed them some more food scraps later. So I've put more dry paper in this layer to soak up some excess moisture. There's a bigger clump of worms. As you can see, they don't like the light, so they will try and dive down under the dirt and under their bedding to escape. They want to stay nice and dark and moist. Sometimes you'll see really tiny worms in the worm bin, and that's because as the worms grow, they lay eggs and new baby worms hatch. So if I feed them a lot of food, they'll have babies and make more worms. They will even eat up the shredded newspaper in the bin because paper is just from a plant. So anything that's from a plant, the worms will eat. Let's get a nice close-up. So I'm wearing gloves to protect the worms from anything on my hands that they might not like. A worm bin like this could probably compost the food scraps of one family, but we just use it for our lunchroom scraps here. Okay, we'll cover up the worms. They don't like being out in the open. Let's take a look at one more layer. Oh, there's a lot of worms in this layer. So they're just busy recycling all kinds of plant stuff. So if you wanted to get worms at home, to compost your food scraps at home, you could do that. What you wouldn't want to put in your worm bin is anything greasy or anything with meat or dairy, like cheese or yogurt. That would just make the worm house really stinky, and the worms wouldn't like it very much. So we'll put the worms back to bed, but you can compost in your backyard in a compost bin, or if you wanted to keep some worms as pets like we do, you could compost at home too.